back to kind of the first topic, data visualization. This is actually this is a very, very famous data visualization. I don't know if you've ever seen it before, but it was written, done by hand. And what it actually does, it describes Napoleon's 1812 march to Moscow and then the retreat. And the breadth is how many soldiers. So I mean, if you're talking about telling a story, start with this, here, and you see these little things here, they're rivers. They were crossing back over rivers and they were dying. This is the retreat. So I mean, this is an extremely strong graphic, and you see their overlays. This was done in the 1800s. This was written in 1869. Not using computers, but this is how you can, if you have creativity and think about it, amazing what you can do with these kind of visualizations. This is considered, in this field, is considered a classic. I mean, it's the next thing we're going to do is linear regression. Basically, fitting a line. So, Kyle. Fitting a line to this kind of data. This is what's called a simple linear regression. We'll figure out how you can fit a line, and then we're going to expand on that. This is going to be a foundation for a lot of what you will be doing in the subsequent classes. That's kind of like just a brief little preview. Questions, comments? This is instead of having you guys dive into that business analytics book and keep on doing a lot of other little problems with toy data and stuff that you probably never will do in the real world. So I hope you guys are okay with this, because I spoke with some of the Tableau representative, and they had actually gone and done a survey of resume kind of skills that listed on college graduate resumes, and Tableau and that kind of skill is one of the fastest growing one. Being able to work in this kind of environment, I hope you already sense that it kind of knocks Excel out of the park, right? Yeah. So it's had easier to get some stuff done. Okay. Let's see. So what I wanted to do is kind of revisit, basically revisit this. This is the white paper that I asked you to read. Okay. So I wanted to make sure we can go over this and kind of recognize almost like the key bit of information is when. When do you use this kind of graph, this kind of bar chart? When do you use a bar chart? Right? Now, you recognize how this is different from a histogram, right? So this is bar chart, and you can have it this way, or you can have it that way. But what are one of the key things about bar charts compared with, say, line chart, histogram, something? There's one thing that you should immediately recognize when we talk about bar chart.
Okay.
Categories. This is the key thing here, that you have categories. There is not necessarily an order here, right? So, but you have this category and then some kind of count or value for that category. And you can do it different ways. In this case, what the example that they show is profit and estimated budget, and they do some comparison stuff like that. They kind of overlay something, but there could be plenty of information if you excluded this estimated budget, right? There is still information in how that bar chart is laid out. Hello. In the different kinds of where is the profit? Where is the profit in this? But the key thing is category. Comments? Did any of you guys end up with a category when you tried to do your little Tableau experiment? End up with a category, I'm sorry. End up with a bar chart? Might throw something in there and popped out?
Yeah.
More or less.
Okay, we'll go back and revisit it. But the key thing again, bar chart, this is one of those very fundamental ones across categories. Stop me if you have comments or stuff like that. So line chart, just as bar chart, key thing is categories. Line chart, key thing is over time. This is the one that we'll have very typically the x-axis being some kind of time variable. In this case, it's years. It could be days. It could be seconds. It could be, but it's typically is some kind of time variable. So if you end up with anything that has a time variable in it, consider something like this. Viewing trends. Where's the pin? Drop it. So the idea here is, if you can kind of internalize, if you can kind of get pull it out of your toolbox. Know when, okay, we got some time variable in here. Okay, line charts would be my default. Now, here's the cool thing. If you go, and now I'm going to jump a little bit. I hope you guys are okay with that. Should recognize this, I hope. So let's do this and open up. This is an example that I think they typically have done in the book. You're with me what I'm doing right here, right? So I just did orders. You see over here, over on this side, they have these little kind of shadowed out, show me, Tableau tries to be smart about what default graphic to pop up. So a lot of the things that you recognize from that white paper, they've tried to implement in the program. So if Tableau senses that you have a time variable, it will try to look for a line chart, if that makes sense. And if there is one thing that actually, personally, I think is one of the key features of this program is that it will try to be smart. It will try to be smart and help you do the right thing. Do the recommended thing. That is one of the problems with Excel, right? You go into Excel and, okay, all kinds of graphs, but no recommendation, no suggestion, no best practice. Right?
Yeah, going on that, like using just using the graph formats, it's completely random what you'll get if you enter that. And if you use pivtails, it's like only half the time you'll get what you want.
Exactly. In spite of this, this kind of information now, there's been a lot of work in this whole data visualization, graphing, and all that kind of stuff. So we get to the point now where we know more, but it hasn't been embedded in the software tools. So that's one of those things that Tableau will help with. So very often, we go back to the different kind of charts and all that. As you start dropping in things, there is a reason for why Tableau will pop up with the different kinds of graphs or different kinds of charts. And they have tried to implement smartness along those lines. Does this resonate? Do you kind of recognize some of this when you tried it out? That it tried to be, tried to pop up and be smart about it?
It kind of tells you on the bottom, it does help recommend, like,
Yeah. Here
try
it
this,
basically
try
says,
that. Yeah.
one or more dimensions, for stacked bars. One or more dimensions, one or more dimensions. So it tries to be smart. So let's say, okay, line chart. Okay. So here's a line chart here. lines, date, one date, one or more measures. Okay, if we flip back, wrong flip. That's exactly what we're seeing here. These, by the way, are Tableau generated graphs. You probably recognize this stuff. One date variable, and then a measure. Measure being a quantitative variable, right? The way that the Tableau language, they measure is a quantitative variable, right? Good so far?
Right.
Good. Okay, Tamara said it was right, so it must be correct.
I was having trouble with the homework data because I was watching the video and I was trying to figure out how to do it from that video. And the way they did it in the video is they right-clicked on the years, I believe, and they went down and they were able to do it, I guess, over time.
By quarter or over time?
Because the way the graph I turned in is just small little line graphs all in a row. I couldn't get it all to go over time.
Okay, we'll revisit. Okay. So what I'm thinking of doing, we're going to work through this, and then I was going to say, okay, now let's bring up Tableau and kind of jointly put our heads together on that data that you all work with, and just say, okay, what did you guys figure out? But let's kind of get a little bit of this background. Pie chart. Okay. All of these have, it's like a key thing. And the key thing with pie chart, proportions. This is the way that you ought to think about pie chart is the pie is 100%. The pie is everything. And then each slice that you show is a proportion of everything. Now, that said, pie charts can be very difficult for us to decipher if they start to become too complex. So one of the recommendations that typically you have on pie chart is don't have more than 5 or 6 slices. Because if you get 48 slices in a pie chart, you can't compare. You can't compare if you get 10 or 15, most likely. The other thing, and this is something I saw in some of your pie charts, and this is back to the proportions. When you start with the data, and this is actually something Excel makes it very easy for you to kind of stumble into, and that is when you do pie charts in Excel, some of you included the summary variable, right? So you had count, and then the summary variable. And when you include that in a pie chart, what was happening? It takes over everything, and then you have little chunks and proportions are all out of whack, right? So now suddenly you really got 200%, not 100%. That's kind of Excel lets you make that error. We should have smarter software. Should is not the two words. Anyway, this is of course a favorite graphic showing that my mother country of Norway has, proportionally a lot of the oil rigs, not surprisingly. If you know anything about that, basically Norway has been one of the top oil producing countries for a long time. They've been lucked out big time as a country. So now we import Swedes to work for us. You're laughing, but yes, it is true.
I have a friend who's from Finland and says the same thing about the Russians.
Yeah. Okay, this, they kind of include map as a kind of graph chart. This stuff, basically mapping and overlaying stuff on maps, just 5 years ago was usually considered extremely complicated and difficult to do. If any of you ever kind of touched that kind of data, it was considered really hard, and the ones that knew, they were hand coding this stuff. Now, with some of the tools that are coming, you can kind of take the underlying map and then you drop the geocoded coordinates. You know what I mean by that, right? You just drop them and then you put a little twist on it, and suddenly you get something like this. 5 years ago, you'd have to have some kind of software engineer that would work for maybe weeks to generate this. you guys are going to be able to do these things drag and drop-ish. It's my expectation. If you end up, and then map geocoded data. You really what we mean by that? Geocoded, that you have some longitude, latitude, or something similar associated with, in this case, lead buildings in your state. So they're kind of like, this could be the same thing as if you were able to slurp out data from your GPS, right? And all of that is geocoded. You can get all kinds of data now from surveys and what have you, overlay zip codes, overlay, all things like that. Again, something that was used to be extremely difficult, but now you can kind of start, and this is kind of where Tableau shines a little bit, and that is you can throw the whole of US into this, and then you can dynamically pick your state, right? Or if we set it up correctly, pick your state, maybe pick your region, West Coast, South, or maybe you can drill down within the state. You could pick counties, or you can drill down further and you could pick, and that's one of those. If the data, the raw data underneath is there, then Tableau as a tool to work dynamically like that is tremendous. And again, those of you that have kind of been a little bit in this kind of area before, 5-10 years ago, we're talking serious manpower to build something like that by hand. And now, we can pull this together if we have the raw data. And this kind of stuff is really nice when you can overlay it with other things, right? So you could add tremendous information. If you, instead of doing lead buildings, you could do, sales by region, or you could do, incidents of something, or fisheries by, yeah. Another one of the core plots, core graphs, scatter plot. The key, again, scatter plot, relationship between two variables. That's the key thing for scatter plot. If you have two variables, and in this case, two numeric variables, okay? So that's like, let's see, let me go back to Tableau just to kind of show you what I mean by that. So let's see, scatter. Where's this? Yeah, scatter. This is scatter plot. Two or more measures. Again, that's kind of like numeric variables. You have scatter, like numeric on one, numeric on axis on the other. If you have one numeric and one dimension or categorical, you get different type of plot, right? So you have to recognize first what kind of variables do you have, and you can plot the measures by themselves, the dimensions by themselves, or you can plot them, it's like measure, dimension, it's like mix and match a little bit. You go from one variable to two variables, and then you start to play along, so it can be overlaid with a third variable. But make sure that you start up with a foundation of understanding what kind of graph is appropriate for the mix of variables that you're trying to communicate. Why do I miss? So in this case, they overlaid also, and this is kind of more what we're going to do later on. See these lines here? Those are, they call them trend lines. This is the same as the regression line. So when we talk about linear regression, these are the same kinds of lines. So we will eventually get to where we're going to do this kind of stuff. And we're going to overlay, and we're going to learn more about what's involved with these kinds of trend lines, or these kinds of regression lines. They're fundamental in that they display the relationship between two variables, but mathematically they extend, so you can actually have a dependent variable, and you can many predictors. or independent variables. And we can't plot them because they got in some kind of n-dimensional space, but the theory makes sense. You have to stop me if if you have questions or anything. So I don't know why they throw in this. Well, I know why they throw in this. Anybody been involved in project management or anything like that? This is, yeah, if you've done that, this is your kind of bread and butter, right? These kinds of graphs. And yeah, Tableau has that capacity. This is kind of stuff that got out of Microsoft project, you got out of all these kind of project management software. They will very often generate these kinds of things. I think the attractiveness of doing something like this with Tableau is that you can do some of the other Flash. But I don't know if any of you have really done project management. I don't know how much Flash you really care about. Can you just get this work done? But if you're going to have to show off something to higher ups, sometimes you need a little color and all that because it's engagement factor. So they included. Basically, it's a project schedule, data over time, tasks. If you need these, you're gonna get them from you're gonna get that information and that knowledge from somewhere else. Typically, we are not the source for that. It's included here because it is a legitimate chart that is useful, but in special context. Now we're getting into some charts that used to be rare, in the sense that they used to be either hard to compute or hard to draw, hard to generate. But now with this kind of data and all that we have now, this is now much, much more feasible to pull together. So this is bubble chart, concentration of data on 2 axes. Now, I don't know if you guys recognize the axes here, but basically, you see what kind of data this is? It's online gaming. So here, they have KDA, my guess is this some kind of kill ratio. Yeah, and then here is average win-loss ratio, and then they have this damage and tankers. This is the healers, and basically they plotted in, and then they use the bubble is some kind of count or some kind of measure of how many are in that kind of mix, right? So you can pull information out of there, basically saying here, okay, damagers and tanks. This looks like okay. If you're heavy on this, you have a good chance of right, but if you end up, I don't know, I'm just kidding, if your healers end up getting killed, you're in trouble, right? At least that's what I think it says. I'm not 100% sure. But the idea, again, is you have 2 axes, and then you overlay it with, you can pull in different categories, and then you plot and use the size of the bubble as kind of a separate indicator. Something like this also, and this you see kind of an additional variable to include. You see the shading or the nuance of the color? That's another variable that can carry information. So part of what has been going on as we get software tools is instead of just having an X, Y, and drop in some spots, we can start to overlay and add more information in the same 2-dimensional kind of paper screen thing by adding sizes of bubbles. We can add color or hue of the color, or what Hans Rosling did, right? He overlaid something like this with movement. And actually, I think you might enjoy, there is something that I'm hoping I can include for your next kind of week. And that is an example of kind of that Hans Rosling style of presentation in Tableau. So you get a workbook that I think you can download and actually kind of go through and see that same kind of of
So you
data.
you can actually do animations in Tableau?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you can kind of phrase it, and you can play it as a movie, and you can do stuff like that, yeah. So histogram. You will be doing histograms. And histograms, the key there is distribution of data. So remember we did the frequency counts and frequency distributions and stuff like that in 120? You know, that's just a variation of this, right? So let's see if we got histogram. Let me flip the Tableau and see what they say about doing histograms. That's the histogram. So what they say here, histogram is one measure, so one variable, but creates a bin. I said a bin, kind of an overlay on it. And what does that mean? A bin basically is, you know, which ones go into this chunk, which one goes into this chunk, which one goes into this chunk, right? So, and there are rules of thumb and there are computations on how many bins you should be using, recommendations. Interesting in the sense that if the bins go to, you know, pack all together, then you actually get a smooth curve, right? And if you get kind of pull them apart and have fewer of them, you get just big clumps. So there's this little trade-off here to get just enough that it carries information, and instead of just kind of becoming clunky. Fortunately, there are rules of thumb that, you know, computationally, that Tableau in general and most software that do this kind of stuff, they will make reasonable guesses on how many bits. Very often. Now, this is just a little curiosity. You see here, you know, it looks like somewhat skewed, right? Positively skewed or negatively skewed?
Positive.
Yeah, positively skewed, right? And then what's going on here?
It just lumps everything over that portal.
It's a long tail, right? Basically, it has, you know, no. So in order to kind of capture everything, they pull it back. But when you see something like this, it's an indication that it really should have kind of kept going. But the thing is, if you kept going with the same dimensions, suddenly, you know, you might need 10 more that don't really carry any information, because they will be, you know, empty, one, empty, one. So that's one way to kind of say, okay, that's kind of the rest. Again, this kind of stuff used to be, you know, tricky, and you had to actually kind of yourself maybe go back into this data and recode that everything over a certain, you know, we pull it back or something, so that you don't get that long tail. Here, Tableau tries to do something smart and reasonable about it. Key again, distribution of data. And this is one of those that when you're going to get asked, eventually, you know, it's like, okay, you need to learn more about the data. Well, if you have numeric, you know, what they call measures, that kind of data, a histogram is very often one of those kind of default, you go to histograms. Go generate histograms. You get a feel for it. And here what they've done is they've overlaid kind of multiple counts, and then these can be somewhat different. They can be stacked. So there's this one plus this one plus this one, all of them, or they can actually be sorted so that kind of like, think of it like three-dimensional. But that can be difficult because then stuff can be hidden. Sometimes you will see that, you know, they will have these three different colors actually kind of split inside, so you get three, so different variations on it. The key thing is that you have a measure, or and it has been binned. The whole idea of binning. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, when you have three of them side by side, it's unrealistic. It's a very long. You have a long X factors.
Yeah, it can really get messy. So that's one of those that if you try to do too much, then you get something that sometimes is called chart junk or chart clutter. It basically, you can do so much now that you can mess it up royally. Like all the information gets lost. So again, that's you don't want to make it too simple, but not fill it up with junk either. Bullet chart. This one I think they put in because they can do it. This is really it's really just more like a bar chart that's overlaid with some other stuff. And it's one of those that I am not 100% sure that bullet chart is something that's been used in general. I think this is one of those, marketing generated charts, maybe. So basically, they can do this kind of stuff. So I suspect that they included it because they it can look nice, but here again is one of those more kind of modern charts, heat maps. And what you try to do here, relationship between two factors. So you have here stuff that has been binned. Can you see that? So this variable right here has been binned. And then here, total weight by age and assets. My guess is this is kind of in the book type. Okay. But the idea there is to use the lightness, darkness of basically the hue of the color as an indicator. This would be, imagine if you that you flipped it like this and then had the darker ones being taller, right? So then you get something that looks like a landscape. Well, there used to be that you could see those kinds of three-dimensional graphs. I'm sure, or kind of charts, right? We can see, and they would kind of shift it to somewhat 45 degree in a line. Problem again with those kinds is we don't judge really well that compare three-dimensional or fake three-dimensional stuff, particularly when they change the angles and then stuff gets hidden behind others. So this is kind of, in some sense, a simplification. But it's also, in some sense, it could easier to see that, there looks to be some kind of trend this way, right? Some kind of relationship starting here and going this way. That's just kind of looking at it. These again are the kind of maps that used to be, difficult to compute, so they weren't often used.
Could you add a legend that would give some kind of depth to that heat map somehow, so you could kind of see you think of like a mountain range or...
Yeah, they typically you would have something on the side that's indicating which ones were kind of more or which one was less.
Does the program set up a legend?
Yeah, well, it kind of, let me see here. I think they had heat maps there. Yeah. So here what they say is for heat map, one or more dimensions, one or two measures. So the measure was the one that was binned. The dimension was those categories. In this case, it was some ranked something. But they typically can mix. This is a heat map can be one of those where you actually can mix a dimension and a measure, or mix a categorical and continuous. But the continuous variable has to be binned. So it may fit for some things, it may not fit for others. Do you understand what I was saying there? Mm-hmm. All right. So because now one way to add more information to that is actually the next one, what they call a highlight table. It's almost, it's in the same flavor. But here what they've done is you have the same, there is a color coding to the values. but there is also some kind of numeric. So you overlay the table also. So you can kind of take 2 steps back and you get a little feel color-wise. And if you have a need to go in and drill in on getting specific, so security 2016 163. So you get a benefit of both graphical presentation and a table. And they kind of overlay a mix. Can it get messy? Look at yourself, yeah. It easily get messy, very fast. So I don't think necessarily this is always something you want. Yeah, I think personally, this is pushing it in how much they try to communicate. Because one thing is when we can blow it up at here, but imagine now that type thing that is going to go in on a page, right? And we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 categories across, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 down. So now go into Word, right? And do an 11 by 11 table. Your cells are not going to be big, right? So that would be one of those considerations I would have, how is this going to be presented? Here, personally, I think this is too much. It's too messy, it's too noisy. Maybe there could be things that we could chop in here, that would be, could chop here. Or it could be that we could have one table or one graph that was, passed and then one projected, for example. Just to kind of reduce a little bit because, again, that's a kind of a subjective, for me. As I think I've told, very often we're not going to end up with the right answer. There are recommendations, guidelines, best practices, but not necessarily the right answer. I think there are a couple of more. Yeah, this is another one that's kind of interesting. These kinds of maps, or these kinds of graphs and stuff like that, they are computationally intensive and could not be done, or very, very difficult, you basically do it by hand. So this is world GDP through time, 2001 to up to 2010. And then you sort here, this is, I think, the US. No, this is other. And then this is Europe. And then this is Middle East. No, these are the Americas. Yeah, I was really, that was weird. I expected this to America. Now, see, there is an implicit sorting here. Can you see that? They basically have the biggest chunk, they've sorted that direction by size, right? So here, it's not, so in 2001, this was the Americas, this was Europe, Middle East, and then blah, blah, blah. You see that? So we can see that the Americas part of GDP, so this carries a lot of information. So this is the overall GDP, right? This is almost like a bar chart. Although it's not really, if we think of these as categories. Here, the US or the Americas have proportionally most, right? So what happens here? 2007, 2008, 2009. Why did suddenly Europe? Financial crisis, right? And it's collapsed first, or a lot of it happened in the US. So the ripple effect and kind of it took longer before it started to impact Europe. So there was a period of 3 years there where kind of GDP proportionally, Europe thought that they were on top of the heap. Kind of caught up with them, but took a little longer. See that? I mean, I don't know what you guys, but I think it's kind of fun, cool to say, oh yeah, that's why. There is more to it in here because a tree map like this well, the different chunks, the different components you could drill in. If you did this as a live graph, you could very well set this up so you can, for example, drill in on 2001. And then start to see the specifics. Or you might be able to say, you pick one of these and you drill in and you can get more information. That's one of those fascinating things that we can do now with software, is that you have that opportunity to get that dynamic, drill down, back up. It was the holy grail in, 10 years ago of all the business intelligence systems, and we didn't really have computers and capacity to do it. Now, you guys can put this together in a, over a cup of coffee in a coffee shop or something, right? Click, 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 and you're done. What? Am I not right, Tamara?
Maybe not that fast.
No, you might need a couple of cups of coffee. Okay, I didn't get a box and whiskers plot, and you've probably seen them before. They are these kinds of plots, box and whiskers. So let's actually say, can we have what would be a measure box and whiskers. Again, this is another. Have you seen these guys? Do you know what one they have? They try to actually do distributions in the box and whiskers.
Like max means.
Yeah, max mins, and then you have where the mean is and where the kind of the part of it, biggest part of the distribution is. You can kind of take one of these box and whiskers plots, and if you take just one and flip it down, you actually will get the distribution. You can see the distribution.
I think they have us do some of those by hand and statistics. I'm not
Yeah,
100% sure.
Probably, yeah. That's old style. You have to,
Yeah.
uphill both ways and all that, right?
Yep.
Compute it by hand, and if you don't know how to compute it by hand, you don't understand it, or something. Questions, comments? I mean, the notes that you've taken, for those of you that have done that, or that white paper, pull out so you have available for you that key, so that you know which one should I pick. What kind of graph or plot fits what I want to show. I have a measure, to use Tableau, to Tableau's way of talking about things. I have a measure. What do I want to communicate with the measure? Do I want to communicate the distribution? Okay, or here I have one or more measures. So I have like 4 or 5 measures, and I want to communicate. This is another way of communicating distributions, by the way. It's kind of a different way of looking at things. But again, one of the nice things with Tableau is that they will do this, show me kind of stuff, and try to do the right thing. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I've kept talking here. Is this useful, helpful, I hope? What I'm going to ask you guys to do for the next 2 weeks, and eventually I'm going to get it posted on Blackboard and all that kind of stuff. It's been crazy hectic, but there will be, more of this little video. Did you find them instructive? I mean, the Tableau little things. And what I suggest you do, since they run a lot of these Tableau little vignettes or little video things off of the sample that they do, try to follow them. Like have Tableau up, look at a little bit, try to do what they're doing. Sometimes I find them they're extremely quick. Like, and suddenly here's this graph up, and it took like all of 5 seconds. And it's like, what did you do? And I find that sometimes I have to kind of go back and say, oh, she jumped up here and did so what was one I was looking at, they were doing, was it sales and product categories or something? And then subcategory, something like that. I'm not 100% sure if this was this was the one. Or they flipped it, and then suddenly there was some time variable in here. No, and then here it wasn't a sum. It was, they do go in and you can do a lot of these things, right? Now, so actually, let's kind of go say, what did Tableau do? What did I do first? I have a row that's sum of sales. I have some columns here that probably. Let's just do the first one. Actually, let's do this. So what is this?
What is it?
So we have categories here, and we have sales this way, right? It's good for bar chart. Okay? Now, Tableau is pretty nice in that we can do this. Seen that, right? See what I did here? They flip. Or subcategory. Still a bar chart, right? It's just that now they're kind of two levels here. But doing this kind of stuff, I don't know about you guys, but I find this order of magnitudes easier than Excel. You could argue that pivot tables could do some of that stuff and all that, but pivot tables need to be refreshed and need to be revealed and all that. Here, you can poke around a little bit and do. Now, one of the things. If I have order date, what you predict is going to happen? Okay. What happened here? Basically, remember what we did? Line chart.
So in the homework example that we did, a lot of it, they were so close together, a lot of the data was when you did a line chart over time. How can you manipulate that? Can I
pull it apart?
Yeah, focus on.
Okay, so here's one of those neat things with Tableau. At least they try to be smart about it. You see this plus up here? So this is one way you can do it. They will actually do it by quarter. Right? So now it adds, and you can add this, and now you do it by month. So now, this gets to be too much, I think. Here, yeah, actually can have something. So that would be one way. Now, but
I don't want to compare two different rows, I guess. Or more, there was a lot actually.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
They all clustered at the top of the range. So the thing is about how to expand the range. How do you cut the whole end of the range off?
okay, actually, so really what I want to do now is consider this, open lab in a sense, right? So let's experiment a little bit because I suspect that I think I grabbed the desktop probably. This one. So freshman data, right? Oh, I want to remove this stuff. Now, I will be the first one to say that, I'm learning Tableau along with you guys, okay? So, you probably need to help me. So college year, so you were talking about the top 10% and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it wouldn't let you separate it so it would actually flow together. I don't know, at least when I was trying to do it.
Okay. Come on, show me.
I'm gonna. Oh, that's weird.
Maybe you can get you on YouTube.
I mean, just put the time, the years.
Years,
Years
like,
here,
And
And then-
you can do like any of the averages,
top 10%.
yeah.
What did it go?
didn't go.
Or maybe it was like the
And they'll do the
average.
different, you have to load a college variable in there too.
Yeah.
That summed it all, so just throw another variable.
Okay, like this.
Yeah, it's awful. Put it somewhere else. You can also put it in the filter pile.
This kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think I had it the filter, try it in the
Yeah, if you
filter.
put it in the filter, you get a different look. And I think that's a lot.
A filter
Yeah,
here.
if you put it there, you get a different look.
Show
them
them
all.
This is just going to, it's going to include all of them, right? So I don't think you want filter.
So when it just came up different. I know what you're talking
So, but you see what we're doing here? We're kind of poking around part of it now at this.
When the averages,
Okay, average ACT.
yeah,
Okay, so let's do this and then drop this one.
or do you can you make it count? Because that, what did you do, the count or the,
Summing.
Sum, this is,
Sums the averages, so that's, you need it to count.
yeah.
Summing the averages.
No, you can right click on it or something. Or go to-
Yeah, right there.
it's
Change.
Yeah,
measure.
that one,
Count, distinct or count?
count.
Okay.
And then you have to put the college back in there, or 10% or something.
Column or row, or show me.
Could be on the right.
So here is just, and what it ended up just doing the color, right? So they did this. So there's something else.
Yeah, I have more.
Yeah, okay. Summing averages. So this is all.
I swear, I can't recreate it now, but that's all I kept getting. For a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's kind of back up a little bit and say, here we have the data set, the dimensions or categories, ABC, okay, and year. Okay, so we have a time dimension. We have this college that really was just, was it engineering and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, now here we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different measures. So, a couple of things here. One is, remember the very, one of the things is, can we show distributions here? Okay, distributions for this, remember what that was? So let's say distribution for average SAT score, just show me, okay? So here, you see what happened here? It says histogram or bar chart. You want histogram. So here's the distribution for average ACT. You see it's binned, see that? And it's also sorted down here. So remember when we did frequency counts, frequency distributions on the left? That's really all this is, except that here you just drop it in. You recognize what I'm talking about?
What does bin mean again? I'm sorry.
Bin was the kind of the chunks that you put it in. So let's say if we had a data set where we had everybody's birth date, right? And for some reason we want to sort on birth date of something. But every day in a year is a little too much. So what we might want to do is who was born in January, who was born in February, who was born in March, then that would be the bin. Month could be the bin. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. For some reason it decided to do 9 bins. Now,
Doesn't that just happen when you drop it in there? I didn't know that.
okay, let's kind of let's do it again basically, and I can do remove it. So this is what we did. Okay, so we're wanting to look at the distribution. If you drop it in here, you see how it vaguely says show me? So you do here, so it waits for you to pick either, a horizontal bar chart or a histogram. So it's trying to do the right thing. You're not 100% sure what you want. So it could be this. No, that's not really what we wanted. Here, yes. Now we have a histogram. Make sense? So one of the things that I encourage you to do is kind of keep awareness of what it tries to show you. So here, same thing. We're going to end up with pretty much the same thing for all of these. They're going to either say, oh, horizontal bar chart, or this. Now, what are some of the things that we could do here that, so what I did there, I basically did by college. So now we got histograms within college. Doesn't say as much, does it? So I say remove that one again. What if we drop this one?
Yeah, I got that.
What happened here? See, what they're trying to do is there's bin here, and there's some average, it's like trying to be smart, but no, I don't think that's what we wanted. So, yes, you have a tool, but you still need to think. The key thing, I think, is to recognize, if you know a little bit, you can go back and look at that white paper and say, okay, we have some things here. Let's say, remove. Just remove these. So we have this year variable, right? So what if we do year and then retention rate, right? Can we do by college?
Okay, so if you were to that all in one,
So when you bin something like that, it goes up to the dimensions too, right? So
When you bin something else.
because when you originally started, there only was college year and measure name.
Yeah, you've done these kinds of computations, and it might be that you want to use them for other stuff. So they actually keep these computations kind of with your data set.
Okay.
So you create, in some sense, you create new variables by the stuff that we're doing. And it might be that you want to take this variable and overlay it or mix it with something else. Right? So that's again, one of those, my guess is that what Tableau does, and this is purely a guess, when you compute this, it will cache that information because it's sitting live, it's basically building a database in memory right now with the data that you have. And this is not really that much information to retain, so it's a lot easier to just keep it around in case you might want to use this for something else.
Yes, I was thinking that the difference between dimensions and measures, that they weren't interchangeable, but it looks like they are interchangeable.
So if you take a measure and bin it, it becomes a dimension. Think about it, right?
There's just a hard and fast rule for dimensions, and that's they can only be, say, typically this.
They are, they're kind of boxes,
Okay.
or that typically you put counts in them.
Okay.
Typically, or they can be relative. If you have proportions, then they can be percentages.
Mm-hmm.
But so think about a pie chart. What kind of variable go into a pie chart? Yeah. The way that they would say dimensions would be the different slices, and then you would have something else that would be a count that would be converted to a percentage. Or remember with the frequency distributions, you start with counts, and then you get the proportions, the percentages. Those percentages would be the ones that told you how big the slices should be. Right? So for measures here, there are some types of charts or graphs, you only need one variable. But we operate in 2 dimensions, so there has to be something else. Right? Now, if you do a histogram, there's something else is actually, you end up binning on one and you end up doing something else, a count or something on the other. If you have a pie chart, you drop in the category, but there's going to be a count in there or some percentage in there to add that second component of it. Okay? So we are operating in 2 dimensions, so there will always be 2, at least 2 of whatever. Now, it may be that the second axis is what's called meta information. That basically, it's kind of pulled out from the variable that you started with. But there always will be something more. You know, to get really, really deep into it, you can start to look, and I'll let you know, you can start to look, there are like computer languages that are written up for computing graphics like this, not like. And then you get really lost in it because they use math. Anyways, that was completely irrelevant discretion. Not discretion, no. What was the word?
Digression.
Digression. Thank you, thank you. I guess it's getting to, it's getting to me here. Is this helpful? Did you recognize these kinds of things from what you guys did?
Yeah, I just want to get used to using that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I mean that's the whole idea. It's like a lot of what we would want, keep working on, just kind of playing around, but don't just randomly do stuff. Try to keep track. Tableau tries to help you.
It wasn't a lot of work into that one.
Hmm?
I don't know. I felt like it was all saying the same thing.
Yeah, me too.
Like any way you try to look at it, it's like, architecture.
Oh, you mean these?
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that has more to do with the data set than anything else.
Yeah.
This is kind of a trivial data set. The reason I wanted this kind of data set was I didn't want you guys to spend overly amount of time just building the fancy graphs. Right? I wanted to make sure that you guys could read in an Excel file, get some names, and get something up that wasn't mimicking directly what was off a video or something. That was really the motivation. Now I'm going to expect you to actually have some data set that are going to be bigger, and I'm going to expect that you will use that information about which graphs or charts are appropriate for the different variables and from the different situations. That will be my expectation for what you want to do next. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but it's getting to be really warm in here. Is it just me? Yeah. I think I'm just gonna kind of ease off this and say,
Tableau's got the computer running hot.
might be smoking. No, it's actually not that compute intensive. So